Alrighty, so we are recording. I want to welcome all the families that are listening in today on our webinar on family goal setting during unexpected times. Myself and Santina are members of the mental health team at the Trenton Military Family Resource Center, and we put this presentation together in order to help families start thinking about how to manage stress with school and expectations with your kids going forward. So we really hope you enjoy this time. If you have any questions or concerns about any of the material that is provided, you can email the mental health team or Santina and I, and we will provide that information at the end of the webinar. Okay, so we are going to cover motivation and what it looks like in times of crisis, and specifically around child development and motivation. We are going to start looking at what family connection is and why that's really important during this unexpected and unprecedented times that we're all experiencing. We're then going to be talking about learning, school, and value systems, and why it's important to kind of set your expectations in a way that is going to provide less stress for us as parents or caregivers. So then we're going to give you specific tools on motivating your children to do things and how to help your children set priorities. Some of the material that we're going to go over works really well for younger children, and some of it works really well for older children. This is just to get you guys thinking about this material. It can all be adapted to your child's age and what they're currently doing and being asked to do. So Santina's going to take over.
First, we want to begin by understanding actually what motivation is. So motivation really looks at why a person actually takes part in a certain behavior. So it can be anything from going for a walk, doing schoolwork, or getting out of bed in the morning. Studies show that motivation is directly linked to overall achievement and success. So I want you to just take a moment and think about something that you do. So if it's working at home, going for a walk, whatever it is. And I want you to think about why you do it and what motivates you to continue to do it. So when I think about myself and exercising, before kind of all of this started, I was doing yoga once or twice a week. I went and I was in a class. I was with a group of people. I went with friends who held me accountable. It was at a set time, and it was at a room that was an actual yoga studio. So I was really motivated to actually take part in it and to consistently do it. But I also did it because I knew that it was healthy for myself and for my mind, and it really did help make me feel better. So now, whatever the activity is that you thought about, I want you to take a moment, and I want you to ask yourself, are you still motivated the same way now that you're having to do maybe this at home? So when I think about myself, it's really changed for me. I'm not motivated the same way to do yoga at home that I was in the studio. For me, it was a really big struggle to kind of find something different and to find different things that motivate me, because I kind of had lost a big piece of what motivated me to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Motivation is such an interesting topic for parents or for people in general. One thing we want you guys to keep in mind is that our window of tolerance during stressful times kind of shrinks. So especially, and this is especially important when it comes to motivation, because what happens is that children will either blow up or shut down. Adults will either, blow up or shut down. And our ability to be actively wanting to do something gets smaller. So when I think of my workday, for example, going into the office helps me stay motivated all day to get more work done. Working from home, my ability to sit in my home office compared to my ability to sit in my office at work is a lot smaller. My tolerance for sitting in front of my computer at home is a lot smaller. There's 100 things outside of my home office right now that I would like to be doing, gardening, things like that. I can spend maybe 20 minutes, an hour at tops in front of my computer, and then I have to go and do something else. I can spend 4 hours in front of my computer at work and just get thrown into it. But because we're in a more stressful times, my ability to sit and focus and concentrate is a lot smaller right now, which changes the way I respond or activate my motivation.
So I wanted to take a moment to talk about the different types of motivators, because often we sometimes don't even think about these. So there's two different types, the intrinsic and then the extrinsic. So basically, these two pictures show exactly what the difference is between the two. So the intrinsic is something when we take part in activities because it gives us autonomy. It gives us that feeling of independence. We have a sense of maybe belonging. Maybe we're curious or we're really passionate about whatever it is that we're taking part in. We're doing it because we love to learn, and it gives us a sense of control and maybe some sort of meaning to our lives. So it's really kind of those inner reasons why we do something. On the opposite side, the extrinsic, that's when we take part in activity because of some sort of reward or we're trying to avoid some sort of consequence. So maybe, kids are getting gold stars or those grades that they're really looking for. Maybe they're doing it for some sort of reward, for money. They're getting points, their fear of failure. So there's a lot of external factors that have an influence on motivation. For example, going for a walk. Some people may be motivated because they want to be outside. They're motivated by the sun. They know that it makes them feel better and it gives them some time to themselves. Whereas other people, maybe they're going for that walk because they're trying to reach a goal of how many steps they take in a day. They're trying to increase their cardio. So there's, even for one activity, there's so many different reasons why we actually take part in it. So I just wanted to take a moment and just kind of explain the different reasons for motivation.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to mention on this is that as parents, a lot of parents often say, I want my child to be intrinsically motivated to do something. But if you think about what you do daily that's intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation is very similar to what your child may be experiencing. You want your child to love school. You want your child to be motivated to do schoolwork. Well, were you motivated to do schoolwork at home? Are you motivated to do work like, actual work at home, working from home? Or do you do it because you get something out of it? Like a
Absolutely.
page? Yeah.
I touch a little bit more on that later as well, but those are really good points to think about, especially when you're during these times and you're trying to figure out maybe why your kids aren't as motivated as you maybe had anticipated.
Yep.
Okay, so stress has a major implication on performance. And as Jacqueline and I have both stated, we are in a time of stress because there is so much uncertainty. So it's a really good point to remember too, as we're kind of working through this presentation. So there's a combination of basic need satisfaction, and when that's mixed with motivation and behavior change, there is an improvement in psychological health and positive outcomes, which in turn actually reflects the improvement in self-regulation. So in a time of stress or in a time of crisis like we're in, our brains are wired and they react in order to protect us. So since we're in this time of uncertainty and we're not in control, our anxiety is heightened, and our self-regulation isn't maybe as great as it was previous. In that sense, there is a negative consequence, and it actually does affect our ability to actually concentrate and pay attention. I know for myself, just like Jacqueline had said, when it comes to work too, there are days when I kind of feel like I'm in a fog and I can't focus on my work as much as I did before all of this or when I was in the office. And that's completely normal during these times. So a huge piece to this is that not all of our basic needs are met. And we kind of need to go back and focus on those basic needs, focus on what we need in order to kind of get the goals that we need to get done, so that we can slowly improve our motivation and our self-regulation. So it all kind of ties in together, and sometimes we need to take a step back and just focus on what we really need, on an emotional and like mental health level.
This also will provide modeling for our children to be able to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
Oops, too fast.
So I know that we've touched on this already too, but when it comes to child development motivation, this is an even bigger struggle for our kids right now. So as I kind of mentioned before, that intrinsic motivation and that inner motivation is not there like it was before. So kids are really struggling right now. A lot of people have been asking me, like, what can I do to keep my kids motivated? And I've been talking to a lot of kids about this too and trying to get their perspective, and why they were more motivated at school than they are at home. And kids are doing work together at school. School and home is supposed to be separate for them. So they are more motivated at school because that's what they're supposed to be doing when they're at school, and they don't have the distractions like they do at home. Teachers are holding them accountable. They're given instant responses, instant gratification. They're doing work with their friends, and sometimes they compare work and things like that, but they're missing that right now. Studies have shown that method of teaching, the environment, and the experience itself actually have a major implication on that motivation, and especially that inner motivation. So our kids are struggling, and that's okay. A huge part is looking at why they're kind of missing that and what is missing right now. I think the best thing that we can do for our kids is create that safe and supportive environment. And it's okay if we need to rely on those external rewards a little more right now, because I think we need to start focusing maybe a little bit on those extrinsic motivations, focus on what they need, and kind of work your way up from there. Jackie, if you have anything to add to that.
I want to remind parents and those viewing this that the rules have changed for home, right? The expectations for what we're supposed to be doing at home has changed, not only for our children, but for ourselves. And that's going to have a huge impact on our motivation, because what we're supposed to be doing and what we're used to be doing is no longer applies. We have a new way of interacting with our environment. And so it can take children a while. You know, I mean, we're 3 months into this, but it can take children a while. It can take everybody a really long time to get used to this change. And then things change again. That's why in September, we tend to see our children struggle for the month of September to get motivated and get back into the school routine, and because change can be difficult. So on that note, let's talk about connection versus results. So this, what is on your screen is a quote from the Institute of Child Psychology. We found it on Facebook, and we thought it really applied to what we're trying to kind of get parents to think about. So working, parenting, and teaching are 3 different jobs that can not be done at the same time. It's not because you're doing it wrong, it's because it's hard and it is too much. When you have to pick, because at sometimes you do, pick connection. Pick playing a game over arguing about schoolwork. Pick teaching your child to do something rather than being frustrated that they are not helping with laundry. Pick laughing, cuddling, and reminding yourself your child is safe. When stressed, lower your expectations where you can and reach out for support and social connection virtually, which is what we are hoping you guys are doing by listening in on this presentation. Really what this is saying is that our children and ourselves are struggling with getting things done that we should be getting done because of our lack of motivation and our tolerance window being smaller. When we feel that overwhelming sense of frustration, anxiety, depression, all those emotions that don't sit well, reach out and pick connection. Reach out and change gears with your children rather than kind of getting into a power struggle. I don't know about those who are listening, but I know that my son is a very stubborn child. And he will, if I engage in a power struggle, it takes way more energy for me to get him to do something rather than if I just disengage and switch gears and then go back to it. That takes less energy.
And I think too, taking a step back and asking yourself, you know, what am I getting out of this power struggle?
Yeah. And what is it you really want your child to get from doing the math questions? Is it just about their learning, or is it about making sure they stay motivated and stay curious? Like, what's the value that you're looking for your child to have?
Exactly.
Oops, wrong way. Okay, so some tips on how to do connection versus results are: children function best when they feel connected with someone who cares with them. So their motivation will increase when they feel safe and secure. You can build connection with your child through play, laughter, roughhousing, cuddling, warm and enthusiastic attention. So one of the ways that we're going to talk about doing this is called play listening, which is easing the tension and helping parents and a child dissolve a power struggle through play or through making jokes. I don't know about people who are listening, but I tend to, when I am uncomfortable, make inappropriate jokes or make funny faces. One of those two things are always happening. Doesn't always work with my son if I make a funny face at him when he's really angry, so you got to pick your moments. But if I can get him laughing, the power struggle lessens. It doesn't matter your age of your child. This is why embarrassing our teenagers can be so much fun, because it makes them laugh, shake their heads, roll their eyes at us, and then you can continue on the serious conversation.
And I mean, I'm the same as Jacqueline, and if I feel comfortable, I tend to kind of joke around too, and it does make me feel better. I mean, I kind of instantly go from this feeling of intense stress to a little bit more relaxed, and then I find I can pick up my focus again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things to remember is that stress can result from or can increase feelings of loneliness and isolation. So by using laughter, by using connection, we are making sure our children know that they are safe and secure, and that will increase their motivation.
Okay, so I know that there has been stated that school isn't going back until next year. I've still been getting quite a lot of questions about schoolwork and motivation, especially with kids. Again, I think this whole webinar can reflect on our kids and on ourselves too. So I will later on share with you a values worksheet. But right now, as Jacqueline mentioned before, parents are all of a sudden having to be teachers and parents and friends while they're having to work at home. they're having to do all of their regular, stuff, planning dinners and housework. So you've all of a sudden become everything to your kids. And that's a lot. So just knowing that everyone is in a time of stress, there are effects on motivation and behavior. So it's a good time to really take a step back and ask yourself and consider what is really realistic for your family right now. And if, doing schoolwork for 4 hours a day isn't realistic, that's okay. And a lot of parents have been, asking, and they're worrying about, I don't want my child to fail. Talk to the teachers. Come up with a strategy that actually works with your family and what's going on. And again, we've kind of had a lot of conversations about, looking at this situation differently. So, looking at failing in a different way, and looking at, taking a step back and really taking the opportunity to teach your kids how to deal with stress, how to deal with uncertainty, how to figure out what their needs are and come up with goals together. Another big piece too is that during this time, I recommend even expanding your definition of what learning actually means to you, especially in a time of uncertainty. So get creative. Learning can be building outside together. It can be baking and looking at measurements. A huge part is getting those kids and you as a family to be engaged. And as Jacqueline stated before, sometimes we need that laughter and sometimes we need that fun. So make learning fun and kind of redefine what learning is, because this is a huge way we can take a step back, focus on our basic needs again, focus on our emotional well-being, and then the learning and the motivation will follow. So it is a good opportunity to kind of just focus on what you actually need as a family and think about what's realistic.
Yeah. One of the things that a discussion that I've had with teachers and with parents is the difference between inquiring new learning versus maintaining what they've already learned. Yeah. So, what's going to happen in the end of June, we have when official summer breaks going to start. Are you going to just suddenly destructure and let your children not have to do 4 hours of schoolwork a day? Or are you going to still expect them to do some sort of academic work throughout the summer in order to maintain what they have learned so that in September they can inquire new learning? That might be a question that you ask yourself in mapping out your child's learning, is what do I want them to maintain versus what do I need them to do to acquire new learning? So I know in my household, we're strictly doing maintenance right now.
And I think that's okay. I think we're all in kind of that state of maintenance right now. And it's okay to be in that way.
Yeah, I am not a teacher. I love learning. I love teaching my son things, but I am not a teacher by nature or by trade. So I don't know how to teach a grade 2 how to do math. Mm-hmm. So he's just going to have to learn that in grade 3. And if I have to hire tutors or get extra help next September, then I will, mm-hmm. and I will be supportive. So right now we're working, maintenance is kind of the goal. And that can look different for every child at every different age. So we're going to talk about some tools specifically to help children stay motivated, or help you take a look at your value systems, or help you kind of de-stress with your children. So the first tool we've kind of already mentioned, which is play listening. So play listening is an amazing tool that helps your child work through their fears and their challenges. And there's 4 steps to it. So the first step is letting your child decide what they want to play. Now, this isn't to say that you're going to say, oh, what do you want to do? Because I guarantee you, if you ever said that to a child, they're like, I don't know. So giving them some options. Say, you know, do you want to do this type of play, or do you want to do this type of play? So some examples would be, you know, do you want to play with Play-Doh, or do you want to play with Lego? You know, do you want to do a science experiment, or do you want to do some baking? Those kind of, you know, let them decide which one what they want to do. So if they're anything like my son, they'll still say no, and then you just say, okay, well, when you're ready to decide, let me know. I'll be over here reading the newspaper. So the next step is take a smaller role in their play. So that means you don't direct them. You don't say, okay, now do this or do this. It's like you let them have free range. You know, read, if with a child, if you're baking and you're playing with cooking ingredients, you can say, okay, this is what we have to put into the bowl to mix. What do you think we should put in first? And let them start adding the ingredients. Take a smaller role in that. The next step is listening, do not guide. So asking questions, listening is really important. Not telling them what to do or how to play, or you know, what the next steps are, is really important. I would often say, if you are forming a response to a child's statement, or to anyone's statement really, you are not listening. So if you want to ask a question or you want to guide them, first make a statement of what they've just told you or what they've just done. You say, I've observed, or I've seen, or look at you doing this, and then let them respond to your statement rather than a question. And then the final step is go with the flow. And I know this is really difficult with a lot of children because their flow is probably really quick, or sometimes very frustratingly slow. One of those things. Honestly, deep breathing will help, I promise. This is where guiding comes into place, right? Going with the flow, letting them guide you. They are the expert. They are the ones that are playing. You are just following along, making sure that they're, you know, safe and that they're not spilling flour all over the, you know, house. That's really important. It's going to let your child feel like they have something that's within their control, that they feel safe. You're there for them, you're playing with them, but they are the boss.
Mm-hmm.
So play listening can work with any child at any age. It looks slightly different for older children and teenagers. It often looks like them trying to teach you to play a video game, to be quite frank. Then at least you know what kind of video games they're playing, and you can have those kind of discussions, or those kind of moments of, oh, that is what Minecraft is. I learned a lot about Minecraft at the beginning of all of this because I let my son teach me.
And
So
I think a huge part to this too is, as Jacqueline stated, it is any age. I do this a lot of the time in sessions, even with teens, and it does work for teens. A huge piece is that you are meeting where your kids are at.
mm-hmm.
So you can do this for any age.
Yep. So, and then it's going to give you an idea of where their value systems, or where they think things are important, are. So on that note, let's talk about the value worksheet.
So this is some questions that I have kind of been asking families along the way. And again, this is good for any type of family with any kids, any age. And it just will give you an opportunity to kind of take a step back and just think about this time and what your values as a family is overall. So taking a step back and just thinking about, you know, what do you value as a whole within your family? And this is a really great question to ask yourselves. and kind of write out those list of values for yourselves and your family. I've had some families, write out the list of their values, decorate it together, and put it on their fridge. Put it somewhere where everyone can see it. And then when it comes to education and learning, what are your beliefs about it? And that's okay that may be adjusted, especially during a time of uncertainty. But it's really focusing on what that learning actually means within your family. And then take a step back and reflect on times in learning when kids have been doing well. What was influencing that? And what is missing right now? So again, that's really more specific for this time of uncertainty. But again, I think that this is going to be a really important piece to ask yourself along the way, as kind of we have this ebb and flow of change. And then asking yourselves, and this is actually a great conversation that you can have as a family as a whole. What are some things that we can do to better support one another? And I always encourage this we piece and doing it as a family discussion, because it does make kids feel included, it makes them feel safe, and it makes them feel heard. Especially as kind of kids get into that preteen, teenage years, they want to really be included. So it gives them that voice, and it gives everyone a voice in the family. Another thing something that I kind of had conversations about it, I heard this stated before, is thinking about how you want your kids to remember this time or their childhood when they grow older. And that's a good way to kind of work backwards and reflect further on your values and what you're hoping that your kids get out of this.
Mm-hmm. And values often are umbrella concepts, like what respect. I want my child to respect me. I want my child to enjoy learning. I want my child to, but when you take a look, if you write that out, what does that actually look like?
Mm-hmm.
Younger children don't understand this concept of respect. Well, it looks like saying please and thank you. It looks like, when I ask them to do something, I don't have to ask them 100 times. I only have to ask them maybe 5, right? Like, and keeping in mind that our kids are going to respond differently to things based on 100 different influencing values. So that question about reflect on times that did well is going to really give you hints on how to set up future events of going well. So I know that if I give my son the iPad at 9 o'clock because I have a meeting at 10:30 when I'm done my meeting and it's time for him to do schoolwork, is not a good time for me to suddenly ask him to do schoolwork, because he needs that transition of a half an hour to probably eat and drink something or to run around and get his energy out before I ask him to sit and do some math, because he's zoned in on a screen for an hour or an hour and a half. So reflecting on, okay, why did that work well, and looking at all the circumstances, especially now that it's so warm outside. Mm-hmm. Temperature is really going to have an effect on us and our children and our motivation and our ability to complete things. So keeping those things, it can be something as small as just environmental change, or they ate something, or, those kind of things.
So this is a motivation jar, because a huge piece of what we're talking about is how to get our kids motivated and how to even get ourselves motivated and keep them motivated. So one of the examples that I've used in the past is a homework jar. Again, this can be adapted in so many different ways. It's a pretty easy, simple activity. So what I've done in the past is I've had kids put together a jar. I always include them in this process because it is fun, and then they know what they can kind of get out of it. So what I've done in the past, and especially during this time, is I've encouraged kids and families to put in examples of everything, that also includes family time together, because we also want to focus on that connection piece. So maybe, after they do that math homework that you've been trying to get them to do all week, maybe when they finally do it, they can pull something out of that motivation jar, and it's a fun activity. So maybe it's, okay, now we get to bake cookies. Maybe we get to watch a movie together tonight. Maybe we get 15 minutes extra of outside time together. Again, kids have really great examples, and if you include them in this process too, and they want to take part of it. So there's a lot of different adaptations that you can do for this, and you also can change up the activities over time. So if you've used it quite a bit, redo it, pick different activities. Again, this is great for any age. I actually have used this with teens before, and it does work pretty well. It's a good thing to be consistent with this too, and have it out so kids can see it and the family can see it. Yeah, so that's kind of one example of a way you can help keep kids motivated, and using those external factors too.
Mm-hmm. Another example would be, those cootie catchers?
Oh, yes.
Those, and then you have like the squares so you have them pick a color, and then you spell out the color, and then they pick a number, and under the flap can be something that they want to do, is another way to kind of do that. So it just had me I don't have tennis balls around or balls around or anything like that I could write on. So a piece of paper like that would also work really well. Okay. So how do you get your children to decide what is important? This works really, really well for older children and teenagers, but it also really works well for you as an adult. It's called a priority matrix because it's about what is most important. So you can put things on here like, I want my child to show more respect. I want my child to say please and thank you. I want my child to do their math homework. It can be anything. But it's a matrix to tell you what you need to focus on in that moment, in that day, in that morning. So you start with important and urgent. That's things that you need to do today. You have a deadline, you need to hand in that assignment, you need to write that email today. So that goes in that box. Then, but if it's important but not urgent, you schedule time for it to do it. You're like, okay, well, it's due next week. My child's math assignment, or my child has to do that next week. So when are we going to make time to do that? When are we going to schedule time to do that, and moving that there? The important thing to remember is that important and not urgent, and urgent or important, are actually kind of personal.
Mm-hmm.
So what is important to your child, you may not see as important, but you have to respect whatever they decide to put into that category. Not important but urgent are things that you can delegate, or things that you can that need to be done that someone else might think is important and urgent. So they need their lucky underwear, they need that toy right now while you're cooking dinner. That's important and urgent to them. It may not be important, but it's urgent to you because your child is running around trying to get your attention while you're trying to do something else. So try delegating that to somebody else. And then not important and not urgent, obviously do not make the list. So some of the times that might be looking like, cooking a full meal instead of just making hot dogs again. So, or fighting, trying to teach your child how to fold their socks or fold the laundry or whatever. Is it really that important for that day? Is it really urgent for that day that your child is doing that? It's up to you to decide. That's where the values questions kind of come in, because important and not important, urgent and not urgent is based on our value systems. And this changes from day to day and almost morning to afternoon to evening. It's a way of doing a to-do list that's more dynamic and less stressful. If you have a lot of things that are urgent and not important, reflect on your values behind those things. Look for those umbrella concepts. Okay. So non-tech learning ideas, I don't know about anybody who's listening to this presentation, but I'm very tired of technology and being on a computer in front of a screen for 12 hours a day, because I go from here to relaxing in front of the TV, or so on a personal note, I know that a lot of families that I was working with, and my son included, suddenly at week 6 they stopped. They're like, I don't want anything to do with a computer. I don't want to play that video game. I don't want to do anything related to a computer. So moving, because they just got overwhelmed with it. So conversations I've been having is, okay, I can't rely on technology because now my child is refusing to use the technology. They won't Zoom with their teacher. They won't, listen to that storybook being read by a celebrity. They're not doing any of that. So what are some non-tech learning ideas for children? So here's a couple of ideas, and Santina is going to explain them. But I also want to point out, in the school board websites also have a newsletter coming out every week if you sign up for it. At least the Prince Edward and Hastings School Board, about non-tech learning ideas for certain grades. I think it goes to grade 8. And every week they're sending out, okay, you can play this card game or this game with your child to teach them math, or to cover this subject, and that might give you some ideas. Pinterest is full of non-tech learning ideas. So those of us who want to pin ideas and actually follow through on them, because a lot of people like me will pin them and not follow through, but pin them and then follow through on them. There's some really great ideas out there. So here are some examples that we think are really important.
So I've added a couple here, but again, like Jacqueline said, you can go on Pinterest, you can go online, and there are tons. That's a lot of the time where I get my ideas. Especially if you are going on Pinterest and stuff like that. Some things that I've discussed with especially teens is building an activity jar. Jacqueline mentioned earlier, when you ask your kids, okay, what do you want to do? A lot of the time, especially now, we're getting the answers, I don't know. So having an activity jar that you can kind of put ideas in, and then you can say, go to your activity jar. Let's pick an activity we can do together. And then picking things that are kind of realistic and that you have the materials for, but then it eliminates that pressure of instantly having to come up with those ideas. So again, activity jars I do with every age, and I do it as a family activity. So that's kind of a nice go-to to have. I know we're trying to stay away from technology, but there is yoga for kids online with the Cosmic Kids. I've even suggested people kind of do a couple online, and then once you kind of have some basics, some little knowledge behind it, take it even outside during these times. Do a family yoga session outside. Beachbody is doing online family workouts too. So same type of thing, going and doing a workout outside together, getting outdoors, getting the family engaged in activity, focusing on the physical health too, because that has such an implication, especially during this time, and making sure that we're staying active too. Again, ideas could go on and on. So we hope just some of these kind of give you some additional ideas, and it's okay to take a step back and focus on these other activities outside of schoolwork, outside of our personal work. Again, having fun is a great way to reduce stress, and this is a stressful time. So have fun when you can.
Yeah. Learning, accidental learning, or is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. So you know, kids are curious by nature. So when you're doing things like cutting the grass or making dinner or anything like that is a learning opportunity for children to learn something new. I had a great conversation with my son about, you know, why things get hot. And so we talked about, you know, at his age level, because he's quite young, what chemical reactions are and the stages of water versus steam versus boiling versus water versus ice, all because he was helping me do some, you know, making pasta sauce. So you know, looking for those opportunities rather than forcing them can really reduce your stress levels as a parent and your child, which promotes that connection piece.
And increases motivation.
Mm-hmm. So sometimes they'll ask a question, you're like, I'm not sure, let's go look it up. Or, you know, go get the dictionary and we'll look up that question. My son is constantly asking, what does that word mean? And so it's important to take those moments and realizing that's them learning.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our presentation. Santina and I both are available to help guide a family, any families who want to know more about this information, or need help kind of working out what their value systems are with their partner or with their children. We are definitely available to guide these conversations uh, moving forward. So here are some resources. I'm going to move our little box over here. So these are some resources that most of our material came from. And we really encourage you guys to go and look up what other families are doing or some of these resources in order to kind of give yourself ideas or kind of relieve some of that worry that you have that we're not alone. A lot of families, a lot of parents are experiencing this stress with their children, and it's really important to connect. On that note, our email, so you can email both of us at mentalhealth@trentonmfrc.ca to ask questions about how to help our children with motivation or how to help our children meet our values and de-stress.
And just to include in that too, the Psychology Foundation, their YouTube page has a lot of great resources for parents and families during this time. And the Institute of the Child Psychology, they have a lot of great resources as well. So those are two that I'm constantly checking too. So there are also great resources to add to.
Yeah, and both of them have, I know everybody is putting things on Facebook, but both of them have tips and tricks on just on Facebook posts rather than, you know, webinars or things like that to kind of help parents meet those needs. The other thing I just want to mention is that, you know, we are getting into the summer months and getting outside. We understand that sitting in front of a computer is very difficult, but if you guys have suggestions or you would like a topic for us to cover going forward, please email us and we will try to get another video up for you. So I want to thank everybody who's taken the time to watch this video, and we will hopefully be seeing people in person soon.
Stay safe.